Today we are playing Stay or Go and talking about how likely we think it is that the Chargers can bring back some of their biggest internal free agents.
You are Locked On Chargers, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Chargers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What is up, and welcome into the Locked On Chargers podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Wade, joined as always by my co-host, David Drogemeyer. We've been covering the Chargers together now for 7 seasons, but this is our 5th season as a host of the Locked On Chargers podcast, bringing you your team every day. Thank you guys for making this your first listen today, and to make sure you never miss the show, go subscribe to the Locked On Chargers YouTube channel, and also follow the show for free on all platforms wherever you get your podcast from. And today we're getting into Stay or Go. We're going to be talking about the Chargers' biggest free agents like Drue Tranquill, Trey Pipkins, Kyle Van Noy, Morgan Fox, Bryce Callahan, and the percentage chances we think that they could return to the Chargers given their salary cap situation being way over the cap right now. But this episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, official sportsbook of the NFL. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon today to get started. First, let me apologize for yesterday's show. We had an interview with Chris Rump. The audio quality just wasn't to the standard we needed to be. We probably shouldn't have been out, but it was a fun interview. We wanted you guys to hear it. We're going to try to get it done again, but we have more player interviews in the works. We're not going to promise anything because obviously this one blew up in our face, but we will have some more guys coming on, and it's very, very exciting, including trying to get Chris Rump on again because we did get some really, really good answers there. But today, David, we're talking about the guys who could be leaving. Thankfully, the guys that we're interviewing will still be on the Chargers next year, pending some doom of some sort. But it starts for me with Drue Tranquill. I think he's the heart and soul of the Chargers defense that's not named Derwin James. I think it's those two guys.
Yeah.
And today I want to just kind of, talk about how likely it could be that some of these guys could be back because we know it's a tough salary cap situation. The Chargers are $20 million over. And at some point we'll revisit this, right? If the Chargers start making some big restructuring, if somebody big gets released, we can go back and kind of see if we see these in a different light. But I want to do it now while we still have really no idea how they're going to get under the cap. And I want to start with Drue Tranquill, David. He was, where do you put him in the top defensive players? Like, there's an argument he was top 3 last season, right? It's some order to me between Khalil Mack, Derwin James, Michael Davis, and Drue Tranquill. And that seems like a pretty important guy to bring back. But yet last year we saw them let Kazir White walk.
Yes, we did. And that kind of began some commentary from, the organization that suggested that they don't really value the linebacker position. And so that's why this one's a little bit more difficult to look at, because Drue Tranquill's coming off of a career year. It really looked like he really put it all together, Daniel. Almost 150 tackles, 10 for loss, 5 sacks, 4 passes defensed, an interception, and a forced fumble. He really stuffed the stat sheet. He was all over the field, and he stayed healthy. He played all 17 games.
It was huge, and they needed him, right? And you saw some growth from Kenneth Murray as well, but you saw a true breakout season from Drue Tranquill.
Yes.
And he's just, I think, a player a lot of, fans can root for and stuff too. Wears his heart on his sleeve. Wears that weird neck thing around his neck that makes him look cool. But it's going to be interesting to see because the Chargers didn't bring Kazir White back at $3 million. So, if you're not willing to bring him back at $3 million, what kind of price is going to put Drue Tranquill out of their range? So luckily for the Chargers, the linebacker market does not move very fast unless you are a true needle mover, right? Last year, when you look at the guys that got signed, it was really only, Bobby Wagner up at the top that really got paid $10 million a season. And even that was kind of preloaded and then, has some void seasons and stuff on it. You're not going to see the 5th year of that contract. But besides 3 players, everybody else that was signed as a free agent linebacker last year made $3 million or less. So I think that makes it more likely. But to me, David, given what happened with Kazir White, given what we know about Brandon Staley and linebackers, given that we don't know if the Chargers can kind of learn from their mistakes, everything says that you should bring this guy in. You don't have backups for him, right? Kenneth Murray, Nick Niemann, and Bong are the only guys that are left. Eamon Bogwamiga.
Yep.
You don't have the heir apparent right now. You don't think you can really draft one and have somebody start right away. And this dude had 5 sacks last year. He was their best blitzer, right? 5 and a half.
Yeah.
That's a big deal. He was really, really good for them. But to me, it seems like it's probably a 50-50 chance.
Yeah. It's funny that you say that because, when we're talking about the percentage to stay, I'm right at 50% with you. I
Okay,
just
yeah,
think
we
it's
didn't talk
hard.
about these beforehand, so
No,
that
we
is
did not.
interesting.
Yeah, we have no idea what each other's
50-50.
percentages are for all of these players, but I'm at 50% because I think it's easy to see the value here with Drue Tranquill. He is in his physical prime. He really coming off of one of his best seasons, and it's conceivable to think that he can get even better
Yeah.
than what he was at last season. So I think the value is there, but the fact that that the Chargers are reluctant to really sign linebackers and have some probably some nightmares or some skeletons from giving out a giant contract to Donald Butler. So that's why for me it's a hard 50%. I mean, the value's there, but are the Chargers going to actually see that value and pull the trigger on it?
The best thing that they have going for him is that he plays linebacker, and it's just not a position that's super heavily compensated. That sucks for Drue Tranquill. He should
It
get
does.
paid, but it helps the Chargers for sure trying to
Yeah.
bring him back and being in that negotiating room, right? This one is maybe even more important for the Chargers to re-sign to me, David. It's Trey Pipkins, the Chargers
Yeah.
right tackle, who played through injury. You heard how Tom Telesco and Brandon Staley talked about him after the season. He played well last year, even trying to play through the MCL. He did miss a few games for sure, but like
Yeah.
63 tackles gave up more sacks than Trey Pipkins did last year. We're talking about a Chargers right tackle, right? That's where we have to go with this as well.
Yeah.
24th in the NFL in pass blocking efficiency. When you're thinking, 24 out of 32, that's whatever. But you have to think about it. There's 64 starting tackles, and he was
Yeah.
24th out of those guys. So anyone with 100 minimum pass blocking snaps, that's where he ranked. That's good. And that was
It's
him
really
playing
good.
through injury.
Yeah.
But he could also be the most expensive, David. So how likely is it that he comes back?
Yeah, I mean, he definitely could be. He's 26 years old, but you have to look at the entire situation with Trey Pipkins. When he first came into the league, we all know that story. He was not good. He came
No.
from a very small school, and he had
To play way too early on. Sure.
right limited playing experience, and the playing experience we saw was not good. I mean, it was definitely out of the frying pan and into the fire for him, and unfortunately, he kind of got burned a little bit. But credit to him for this offseason before, the previous offseason, before the 2022 season, he decided to go get some help, and
He put in the work.
he put in the work and he got better, and it showed on the football field. He played lights out football at right tackle for the Chargers. Whenever he was out there, he was fantastic. And so the percentage to stay here for me is at 85%. I think the
Oh.
Chargers know how valuable a right tackle is. They should know after all of the right tackles they have cycled through that position through the last 10 years. So when they have one that is young, that looks like he is now dedicated to improving his game, I think they cannot let Trey Pipkins get out of the building. So yeah, I'm going 85% to stay.
Yeah, we got Foster Sarrell, right? We got Storm Norton. We got,
Scary.
Sam Tevy, Joe Barksdale. I mean, there's been Trent Brown. No, not Trent Brown. What was
Brian
that?
Bulaga.
What was that dude's name? Was it Trent Brown? Something
Trent Brown.
Trent. Oh my
Trent
God, it's
Scott. Trent
Trent
Scott.
Scott. Trent Scott,
Yeah.
another bad right tackle. God, I feel bad. I'm not trying to trash these dudes, but the best thing, I have him at 70. I have it at 70
Okay.
30,
Yeah.
just because if they had any kind of cap space, I'm putting it at probably 95,
Oh, sure.
But I
Yeah.
think they have to hope they can get him before he hits the open market. There's not a lot of good tackles out there. They have to hope he's flown under the radar and people
Yeah.
are only judging him based on his, hobbling season this year, where he clearly wasn't at 100%, because when he was healthy, he was great. If you have
Really
a
good.
great right
Yeah.
tackle in your building, and you can go into potentially the next season with Rashawn Slater, Jamari Sawyer, Corey Linsley, Zion Johnson, Trey Pipkins,
Got to feel really good about that. Really
and
good.
you have so many other holes. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So like last year, there's not a lot of middle ground. We saw some of it last year with Lel Collins making like $7 million a season. I mean, sign me up for that deal with Trey Pipkins right now.
Yes.
Maybe he wants to, sign short term, try to build up his value. Maybe that plays into the Chargers' favor, and they can
Still young.
draft somebody this year that they can hopefully groom into being a swing tackle, being the right tackle of the future. Jamari Sawyer feels like he could be a swing tackle if you needed him to, right? And just slide in and start at left guard tomorrow if they need him to. So Trey Pipkins, to me, probably number one as far as the guys I think is most important to bring back. I mean, I think you could find some of the value, at linebacker and get someone who can play not as well as Drue Tranquill, but get closer to it than I think just trying to throw another dart at the board at right tackle and just hope you get what you get kind of a thing. So Trey Pipkins, huge. Hopefully the Chargers can re-sign him because it's very, very important to protect the golden arm of Justin Herbert. But there's other big names, and they're not going to be able to sign all these guys. I mean, those are the highest percentages I have right now. because I think it's going to be really hard for them to re-sign Morgan Fox, Bryce Callahan, 2 guys on 1-year deals, former Brandon Staley disciples that came in and balled out and probably earned themselves and maybe even earned themselves out of what the Chargers are going to be able to pay. So we're going to have that conversation. But I do need to tell you guys that today's episode is brought to you by Blue Nile. Valentine's Day is coming up, which means romance is in the air more than usual. I don't need to tell you lovebirds that. You probably had your day plans for calendars for weeks. If you haven't, make sure you schedule something for Valentine's Day. It's very important to me because my wife's birthday is the next day. But have you guys found the perfect Valentine's Day gift yet? Because it's not too late to go to BlueNile.com, where you can shop with the modern convenience of shopping online. Because at Blue Nile, you can find the perfect piece of jewelry for life's special moments. And chalk Valentine's Day up as one of those special moments. But maybe you're planning on popping the question on Valentine's Day. You can also make your own custom engagement ring for her dreams. That is a big part of it too. Being able to find a customized way to make sure your significant other gets the exact rings you want. You do not want to get in trouble when you're buying something for such a big moment. But Blue Nile's diamond price guarantee also allows you to compare competitors' diamonds against one of theirs. Blue Nile can even meet or beat their price. And every order is insured and arrives quickly in a discreet package that won't give away what's inside. Shipping is free and so are returns. So right now, guys, you can save 50% off at BlueNile.com. That's BlueNile.com for up to 50% off at BlueNile.com. I also need to tell you guys about one of our new sponsors that I'm very, very excited about, and that is FanDuel, and it's the only app that you need for the Super Bowl coming up, and it's the Super Bowl, guys. The number one day you want to have FanDuel for sure, and we're really excited about our new sports betting partner for Locked On because they are the number one sports book in America, and if you're new to FanDuel, that's even better because they have so many great features that make betting on sports fun and easy. Right now, download FanDuel so you can bet Super Bowl 57 with a no-sweat first bet. You'll get up to $3,000 back in bonus bets if your bet doesn't win. That means you can win even if you lose. And I'm not a betting expert. I'm a Chargers expert. That seems pretty good when you can win money after you lose. And you have all the best prop bets that you can find. You can go money line, you can go point spread, all of those things, but you can also find all the best props, and you can do same game parlays where you can stack multiple bets in the same game to multiply your winnings. So join FanDuel today at FanDuel.com/lockedon to claim your no sweat first bet at Super Bowl 57. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, let's get into a couple more of these stay or go here's. I mean, a lot of these guys, it's hard, Dave, because if you could just pick, cap not restricting, you'd probably keep most, if not all of these guys. We'll talk about Nasir Adderley and Kyle Van Noy later. But Morgan Fox is the tough one because Morgan Fox was fantastic this year. A career high 6.5 sacks at defensive tackle.
Yep.
Took over for Jerry Tillery when he moved on and only got better with more snaps, which is great. Flamed out in Carolina in 2021 after being great with Brandon Staley in 2020. Now he's recouped some of that value. Will another team be able to go out there and give him that multi-year contract in a different scheme when this is the scheme he's really played the best at his whole career? A lot of, Fangio disciples out there. So maybe someone else thinks they can recreate that. But the Chargers also invested a lot in Sebastian Joseph Day and Austin Johnson, 2 of the biggest defensive tackle contracts given out by anyone last year. And it's going to be really tough to retain this dude because being an interior pass rusher with 6.5 sacks is something that usually gets you paid.
Yes, it's extremely valuable. Obviously, getting after the quarterback, that's money. You affecting the quarterback, that's why those guys get paid millions and millions and millions of dollars, because the quarterbacks get paid millions and millions and millions of dollars. Those guys impact the game so incredibly. They're very, very important. And it made a huge difference. I mean, I can't sit here and tell you how many times throughout the years I just wanted anyone to get any kind of pass rush from the middle or the interior of the Chargers defensive line. And they finally had some semblance of that this year.
It's been over
Morgan
10
Fox.
years since someone had that. 6.5 sacks. They haven't had that in a very, very long time. Even like Jamal Williams, right? He was not a pass rusher like that.
Right, no.
Corey Legit was brought in to try to be that. Jerry Tillery was brought in to try to put up the numbers that Morgan Fox did, making $2 million last year, right? Which is insane. The Chargers
1.187 is what
under
Morgan Fox made
under
last
$2 million
season.
last season. That's insane. But he was easily their best interior rusher. Just in the NFL, he was 7th in pass rush win rate with anyone who pass rushed 100 times last year. 7th in the league.
That's
7th
really,
in pressure
really
percentage.
good.
12th in defensive tackles and sacks. 15th in just total pressures, and that was him playing in a reduced role at the beginning of the season. I don't know how they can make it work, though, David. I mean, I have the chances of them being able to resign him at 25% right now. Maybe someone, buys into it. I mean, it seems like someone's going to buy into what he can do for them. And it just seems like he might have priced himself out for the Chargers.
That's exactly how I feel. And I think a little part of me is like, well, maybe he sits here and says, well, I've had my best years under Brandon Staley in his systems. And that
Right.
would be true. But also the other side of it is this guy, just like everyone else in the NFL, is trying to make money. Okay.
He's
And
going
he
to be
is
29 this season
28. Yeah,
too.
he's 28 years old. And so he needs to strike while the iron is hot. If someone is going to offer him, some money, he's going to take it. And
Yeah.
I feel like that is going to happen. I have the percentage to stay here at 30%. And
Yeah.
and honestly, it's probably lower than that. I just don't see any conceivable way outside of the Chargers making just major restructures that they're going to be able to to be able to bring Morgan Fox back, which sucks because he was great.
He was excellent. And I mean, that's going to be the thing with the Chargers, especially with their salary cap situation, is can they replicate kind of what they did last year where they brought in Bryce Callahan and Morgan Fox,
Yeah.
Kyle Van Noy, all on really, really cheap deals, right? And it
Yeah.
feels like they're going to have to be able to do that and hope more guys want to come play for Brandon Staley so that they can recoup some of that value. But this is definitely stock up for Brandon Staley, who basically just gave 3 guys career seasons, right? Or best seasons they've
Absolutely.
had in a long time with Morgan Fox and Kyle Van Noy. And Bryce Callahan, who just had a career high 3 interceptions this year,
Yep.
career high 15 games played, which was probably the biggest thing, the biggest not going into this for
Oh, yeah.
sure, right? And also the Chargers have some corners, right? Maybe
Yeah.
Jasir Taylor is someone they feel like, but can take over the slot corner, right? But it's hard though, because it's like if you had, JC Jackson was healthy, right? And you felt good about that. You can move Asante in and keep Michael Davis, and you'd have those 3 guys.
Right.
You wouldn't feel like you need it. But with the JC Jackson injury, it makes it a lot tougher. I have to think that he definitely recoups some of his value. What Bryce Callahan is going to go for next year is really probably one of the hardest ones for me to try to figure out.
Yeah, I agree with you because the fact of the matter is he stayed healthy for 15 games, but he's 31 years old.
Yeah.
And when you're a corner in the NFL, that's a
It
very
can go quick.
recognizable number. Yeah,
It can go like Chris Ayers Jr.
right. And hey, this is a guy that has good speed, and the Chargers really utilize him everywhere. They line him up in the slot, outside, in the box, and a couple of times on the D line. So he was really put all over the place, and he really excelled and played extremely well. I have my percentage to stay here for Bryce Callahan at 45%.
Okay.
It's close to 50 because of the age here and because of
Yeah.
the injury history in the past.
Like
I
you
do
think that's going to make him more likely to sign with the Chargers, you're saying?
Right. I feel
he
like
should be
that.
cheaper because of that kind of thing.
Yes, I feel like those are the 2 factors that might work in the Chargers' favor in re-signing him. But again, he had a great year, and I mean, everyone's always looking for corners. Corners, pass rushers are a hot commodity, and I mean, it doesn't take a trained eye to be able to see that Bryce Callahan is still a very valuable and good football player.
And I think the thing is if you can, cross another big need off your list, like someone like Bryce Callahan that could come back on the cheap, you have to do it.
Oh yeah,
Because I feel like if you get Bryce Callahan back, you're feeling very good about your corner situation going into this year, even without J.C. Jackson, because him, Michael Davis, and Asante Samuel Jr. all played so well. Doesn't feel like you have to take a first-round corner to try to replace one of these guys, right? It feels like you have more flexibility if you can bring this dude back and worry about the other bigger holes, like the next edge rusher, trying to find a speed receiver, tight end, all of these other things. We know the Chargers are going to have to spend premier capital on more than likely.
Oh, yeah.
So I think if you can bring him back and solidify your corner room at least one more year, run it back with that group, I'd be okay with it. If you want to try to focus, on the rest of the spots that are going to be hard to fill because of your salary cap situation and trying to get underneath it. So Bryce Callahan, I have it at a 35% chance, right? I think, about a third is kind of what seems right to me. We don't know what the Chargers' interest is at this point, right? With his age and everything.
Yes.
But they should want him now because he was very, very good. But so was Kyle Van Noy. And unfortunately, we're at a spot here where it feels less likely that someone like Kyle Van Noy could come back, or, that more likely that he leaves than he could come back. He's older too. 5 straight sacks to end the season. He seems likely to at least get interest from the Chargers, I would have to think, considering their edge rusher situation is still kind of in shambles a little bit. Nasir Adderley, on the other hand, that one's a lot tougher. It's been 4 seasons. Are the Chargers ready to move on? And his market value on SpotTrack was crazy. So we're going to get into that. But today's episode is also brought to you by TurboTax. Go to TurboTax and don't do your taxes. Meet with an expert who will do them for you. TurboTax experts can relieve you from the stress of taxes and file for you so you can do not taxes. Show your eyes things that are not taxes. Unpack a moving box of not taxes. Taste not taxes. Sing not taxes a lullaby. Hope not taxes sleeps through the night. Grab a saddle and ride not taxes into the sunset. With TurboTax, an expert will do your taxes from start to finish, ensuring that your taxes are done right, guaranteed, so you can relax. And it feels good to be done with your taxes, doesn't it? Come visit TurboTax and don't do your taxes. Visit TurboTax.com to learn more. Intuit TurboTax. Full service products only. Video meeting while expert does your taxes required. See guaranteed details at TurboTax.com/guarantees. Stay or go, David. It's been stressful to figure out how the Chargers are going to bring back so many important players. And for the, big contracts like JC Jackson gave out last season that didn't work out, a lot more did work out. I mean, Austin Johnson, Sebastian Joseph Day, probably kind of still the jury is out, I think, on those contracts. But there's some to see how immediately they impacted, right? And Kyle Van Noy, especially during the Chargers run at the end of the season, he was their best edge rusher the last 5 weeks of the season. 5 sacks in 5 straight games. The playoff game, a little harder to say, right? I mean, that was a tough game for a few different guys, but for him especially to have, a pick go through his hands kind of thing, have a chance to seal the game right there is tough. Either way, it doesn't take away from what he did, especially as someone that didn't catch on till later in the season, but ended up becoming a team leader, right? For sure. He ended up taking more of that role. The Chargers may be likely to draft someone at this position, so maybe that kind of pushes him out. But he's another guy where it's kind of hard to tell what his value is at age 31 right now. A lot of teams need situational pass rushers. I mean, James Houston is still out here doing it, or Lamar Houston is still out here doing it, still crazy, and he's about to push 40. So there's a lot of guys who've been able to do it late, and like Dwight Freeney came super late to the Chargers. Like pass rushers, you can be a situational pass rusher later, and I think he showed that he can do that towards the end of the year when maybe teams didn't think he could. He's going to be a really tough guy to re-sign. I know out there he's been like, hey, I want to come back. I just don't know if the money's going to work.
Yeah, and hey, to his credit, and transitioning from a position at middle linebacker that, is not the sexiest, and we talked about earlier in the show, those guys don't really get paid, to kind of moving more towards the edge rusher side of things, and we do know that they get paid, and they get paid very well. And he's done that successfully, not just this past season, but the last 4 seasons. He has 5 sacks in his last 4 seasons every single year.
Somebody will want that for sure.
Definitely. A team is going to want that. And that veteran leadership, he's a winner. He is a Super Bowl winner. That has value. The ability to get after the quarterback as a situational pass rusher definitely has value. This is another one here that's hard for me to see the Chargers and Kyle Van Noy renewing their marriage. So I have this one at 25% for Kyle Van Noy. I like to see it. I feel like he really started to click towards the end of the season, but just considering his age, I don't know if this, and like you said, I feel like the Chargers are probably going to draft somebody at the edge rusher position. I don't see this marriage continue.
Yeah, I mean, they need to get younger there. He filled in admirably, especially towards the end of the season. It got off to a rough start. I don't see it happening. I mean, I feel like he can go get $5 million somewhere, and it was kind of close to like what the Chargers gave like Kyler Fackrell at one point, right? To come in and kind of be that guy. Still showed he has some juice. He was doing it late in the season, which I think teams like to see. I have it at 15% chance. Just the vibe I've gotten on it from him is like, to me, it seems like, hey, I liked it here. It was fun.
Yeah.
But now it's time to go see if I can get paid one more time, kind of a thing.
Right.
So maybe I'm wrong. Could be totally misreading the situation. Sure. Nasir Adderley seems like for the rest of the guys, it seems like the Chargers would have some interest in bringing them back, right? Because of the roles they played. Nasir Adderley got benched this season for Alohi Gilman. They have Alohi Gilman, but hard to say that JT Woods is ready for a bigger role because he can't tackle. And that's a problem in the NFL when you can't tackle.
Yep.
The craziest thing to me, David, is that SpotTrack had his market value at $8.7 million per season. It was nice to see a career high 2 interceptions. The running game was still a problem for him, taking good angles. I think he was more decisive at times this year, had a couple of really good tackles early in the season where he was shooting the gaps, making big plays. Too few and far between, I think, for me, as far as having the comfort to want to bring someone like this back, especially just with the other glaring needs. Hey, if the Chargers had a luxury of having a bunch of cap space, they could bring him back cheap as someone, and maybe they try to replace him and keep him as a depth piece who knows the system and everything. That's a different conversation. As we're seeing it right now, he's probably going to want to go somewhere he's going to start. And it's hard for me to think that the Chargers are going to be like, hey, come back, we'll sign you. Your starting spot is guaranteed.
They can't. They just can't. Just looking at the value and the production that he's brought to the table. 3 interceptions in 4 seasons for a guy that had a reputation coming out of Delaware as a ball hawking free safety.
Yeah. One thing about the positional value too, David. What did you say? Drue Tranquill's market value was $4 million,
Yeah,
right?
about $4 million. Yep.
And now you see Nasir Adderley's at 8.7. And this is, Spot Track had Sebastian Joseph Day's like exact contract last year when we were looking up
Yeah, he
market
did.
value. So
Yeah,
it can be hit or miss, but it can be very accurate at times. But like, well, in what world, right, are you paying Nasir Adderley $8.7 million?
Not
And
this one.
Drue Tranquill $4 million. So it just that's why positional value matters a lot. And it's crazy to think that, but I mean, if it really costs that much, there's zero chance. If I knew it was going to cost that much, it's zero chance. I have a hard time believing he's going to get that.
Yeah, I have absolutely no reason to believe that he's going to get that from the Chargers. I just feel like this is definitely one of those situations to where, they took a chance, they drafted him in the 2nd round, and this one just didn't work out. It just didn't work out. He had all the potential in the world, but potential is nothing unless you act on it and you actually turn that potential into production. And so, unfortunately for Nasir Adderley, I'm putting the chances to stay here at 5%. And it's probably even less than that. Honestly, I think there's no chance Nas is going to be wearing a different uniform next season.
Yeah. You think there's a big chance he's going to be wearing a different uniform next season?
Very much so.
Right. There's a comma in there, I think. But yeah, I mean, I have it at 10. I mean, it seems unlikely. You don't see usually guys get benched. Hopefully he can catch on, right? And that's the thing. It seems like you're bashing him, but it's like when you're having to go through these decisions where you feel like the Chargers should be bringing back pretty much all these guys, this is the one that doesn't seem as, hard to decide on just from a production standpoint, right?
Yep.
But JT Woods, like that's a shallow group, if they lose him. Obviously, we'll see what happens to JT Woods. Alohi Gilman had a career year, but I think the thing that's working against Nasir Adderley is like, hey, maybe you're not getting takeaways some of the other seasons, right? You're not getting the interceptions you'd want to see from a free safety. You're putting a lid over the defense. But unfortunately, the Chargers were like 3rd worst this year as far as giving up explosive passes. So when you're the guy getting most of the snaps on a defense that's giving up the most explosive passes, and you're the guy that's on the back end trying to, take those away while also not producing the ball hawk numbers, it's one thing to give a bunch of explosive plays. If you're getting 6-7 interceptions a year, right? Maybe then it's more of like a Marcus Peters. Okay, well, like there's a lot of good,
and he wasn't the most physical tackler either. So it's
better.
hard to sit here and say there's one thing that he can hang his hat on and say, hey, I did this really, really well.
And I think that he improved, right? Maybe this year it plateaued a little bit, and maybe this year, this year and last year were kind of where he was at. Started making positive progression towards the end of 2021, right? We were feeling pretty good about it. But this is the year for him. He knew it, right? Contract year. Didn't have the season he wanted to. And I think if the Chargers, with a different regime now, coaching staff-wise, are going to bench him in the season, it's just hard to imagine he comes back. It becomes a position, maybe you have to look in the draft again to try to find something, right? Maybe this is somewhere where you think you can find that Bryce Callahan $1 million deal for somebody to bring in, who can just be a dependable backup or, give you some free safety kind of starting snaps. Because I don't think Alohi Gilman's really a true free safety. He played it well when he had to this year, but he also had some big mistakes, especially towards the end of the year as well. So it's a position that's a little bit in disarray, but it's still, even with that, even with the uncertainty behind him, it's hard to imagine that Nasir Adderley is wearing lightning bolts next year. Wishing him all the best, and maybe we're wrong, right? But with all the Chargers' needs, it just seems like they have way, way bigger needs. Guys that need to be much higher priority as far as bringing back to try to keep this playoff team together, right? And try to keep the core of this team that made a big run while being super injured together. And that's, I think, what you're trying to do. And then you're gonna have to hit on some draft picks to make it happen, because you're going to need some impact players from this draft class with what the salary cap situation is. And on Monday, we're dropping our first mock draft Monday, talking about who the Chargers could take in the first round. We'll spend a few shows getting to a bunch of different guys the Chargers could end up taking in the first round. Then we'll start branching out for more. But to make sure you don't miss it, and to make sure you don't miss some player interviews coming up next week, make sure you're subscribing to the Locked On Chargers YouTube channel and also following the show for free on all platforms wherever you get your podcasts from. You can also find the show every day on all of our social media. It's another great way to make sure you never miss the show. You can find us on Twitter at LockedOnLAC for the show's page, and you can also find me on Twitter at Dan Talk Sports and David Drogemeyer on Twitter at Drue Tranquill SD. You can also find us at Locked On Chargers on Instagram and on our Locked On Chargers Facebook page. Thank you guys again for making us your first listen today. appreciate everyone's patience who stuck with us yesterday. It means a lot to us, and we promise we will have a higher quality for what audio comes out, and not just get excited, hey, we had a Charger player on the show. But thank you guys for making us your first listen again today. And make sure you don't miss out on everything else going on around the league. Make sure to check out the Locked On NFL podcast and get daily conversations with the biggest NFL stories, plus in-depth analysis with the biggest games with NFL Key Prediction Show, and also the game-to-game episodes after the show. But that is going to do it for us today. Make sure you guys are back here on Monday for Mock Draft Monday, round 1. Until then, guys, take it easy and go Bolts.